You should learn every element of the business. So starting from the bottom up, you should know every element of that. And I embrace that fully. And I'm also a firm believer in that. I started as a sales manager, moved up to head of sales, then head of operations gradually. And the company grew very substantially in that time as well. In the end, I was made CEO. The challenges of the markets we work in mean that there are little failures always along the way. And I'm very much a believer in it together. You've got to succeed and fail together. A right of everybody that I will work the way I want to work, irrespective of anything. And that was challenging. So the role of AI, I think, will become ever more important, and it will still for a while be a support structure for people rather than something that leads for others. So the defining part of every business and the quality of that going forward. It's always been about building a team that knows that you're there for them. I think that makes a hell of a difference to people. Be much more focused in everything you do. Think long term, because the foundations you lay down early in life are going to be a lot stronger.
Hi everyone. On today's show, I will be interviewing Harmeet Ahuja from Simac, where we will go in deeper into how the group CEO like him has risen through the ranks to the board level today. Harmeet, welcome to the show. And let's start off. How did you get started? Talk me through it.
My story with Simac is that I joined about 23 years ago, and it was shortly after I got married, and I was given the opportunity by my father-in-law to come sit with him, learn from him, and rise through the ranks, frankly speaking. And he was always, he is rather a believer in how that you should learn every element of the business. So starting from the bottom up, you should know every element of that. And I embrace that fully. And I'm also a firm believer in that. I did my time, started as a sales manager. He taught me very well. He was a great mentor. And I gradually made my way up the ranks. But and it's a family business at the end of the day. And when you're in a family business, you come in and the first thing people think is, oh, they're going to have it easy. And I think that was a challenging thing, that trying to work with the people and show them actually you deserve everything that you're going to be getting, and you're going to work harder and you're going to earn their respect was always something very important. Joined the family business, I say more than 20 years ago. Started as a sales manager, moved up to head of sales, then head of operations gradually. And the company grew very substantially in that time as well. In the end, I was made CEO.
Fantastic.
Yeah, please.
How long have you been the CEO now?
In family businesses, these are fluid situations. So you can be called the CEO, then you can call something else. But ultimately, whether you are a CEO or not, you have the role of trying to do everything and making sure everything is going well. So you consider it not as a CEO role in the way somebody might look at it, oh, you're a great strategic driver or something like that. But actually, it's about looking after the business in every respect. And you will have elements of the CEO role from a much lower level, but then you become a more formalized CEO over time. So it's difficult to say, but at least a good decade, I would say.
Yeah, you're being very humble right now, because I was looking up, doing some Google search on you. And can I call you Sunny? Because I think you Sunny.
Yeah.
Sunny. I see you for the Thames Valley TVCC. You won CEO of the Year. I've got the award. So talk to me about that one.
Okay, so that was utterly unexpected, but I won Thames Valley CEO of the Year, top 250 companies 2 years in a row. So that was quite the privilege. And it's hard to say. You don't necessarily apply for these things. It was something which I was put forward for by somebody else, and then I won it, and then I won it again. And it's a very privilege. It's something you never forget, but it's not something that you hang on to all the time. But occasionally, it's very nice to be reminded of that. But it was because I think we had grown from a small business that was turning over about £8 million back in 2002, 2003. And by then we had reached about 180 odd million pounds turnover, which was substantial. And that too, we specialize in emerging markets. So we went into those places which were the hardest for other people in their minds, the most challenging regions of the world, and said, look, we can do something special here. And I think because we succeeded there, it was recognized as being a bit more than if we had achieved the same thing in somewhere like the US or Europe.
Yeah. And talk to me, 8 million to 180 million, you mentioned, if I got the number right. How long did that journey take?
No, I would say about 10 years.
10 years, wow.
Yeah, 10 years. 10 years was that? Yeah, about 10, 12 years, something like that is how long it took. And it was like slow at the beginning, then it just absolutely exploded for a number of years. And yeah, it was a hell of a challenge.
Talk to me some of the challenges you had.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you look at the country mix, although the regional mix, we specialized in business in African markets, in small islands around the world, places which I define them as non-core countries for brand owners. And I should say Sunmark is a distribution company, a fast-moving consumer goods distribution company. And we also had our own labeled products in drinks, in food, in various food items, biscuits, vegetable oils, and certain toiletries and household care products. But we were distributors for famous food brands. So we worked with the likes of Mondelez, or you could say people like PepsiCo. We would work with them and we would help develop brands that to you and I may be very common, household brands like Cadbury's, for instance. It was our job to help develop those brands in places like Nigeria, okay, or Kenya. And it was taking a task that might otherwise be overly complex for a multinational and saying, listen, we don't worry about that. I'll take care of it for you. And as we did that, we built a reputation. And many brands came to us, but not necessarily many brands. It was like those companies themselves said, we would like you to do more for us. And then you build those strong relationships, those trusting relationships, that if there is something that you want done, give it to Sunmark. They will put everything behind it and they will report back to you and they will do it a certain way. And that was a successful model for us and continues to be, to the States, to a substantial business. And then we did our own brands because we looked at the brands as there are some products that we should sell which are specifically complementary to what we do. So look, we worked with Heinz and they had a Heinz baked beans, who doesn't know that?
Yes.
And we did a baked bean brand that was similar, okay, to what they did. But somebody who wants to buy Heinz will buy Heinz. But somebody who wants to aspire to Heinz might use us as a stepping stone to get to the top brand. But also we would take more shelf space in any retailer, any wholesaler, and we become more important to their supply chain. Your importance as a supplier to a customer, whatever that customer might, what form that might be, whether it's retail or a wholesaler, became more important. So you would fill their shopping basket, so to speak, more than another brand would. So that was an important consideration for us. So do your own label, do the thing that the others don't want to do it in the places they don't want to do and take on the hardest jobs, and then do those well, or as well as you possibly can. And you get appreciation for it in many forms.
Fantastic. And you're 180 million from 8 million revenue. That's amazing. And looking at emerging markets, I mean, everyone would generally run towards the US, Canada, those kind of markets, but you all took it slightly different. What kind of analysis, either thought process that went through around that? Or was it purely the data was proving to you, okay, this is where we should be focusing on?
Yeah, so you've got to imagine, take it back 20 years, the internet wasn't even what it is today. And there was no AI and there was an absolute absence of data for most of these regions. So the whole thing was you go on gut instinct and you go on where is the market gap. So the gap was there. Okay, it was like people saying, I don't want to touch these regions because I can keep myself busy and show substantial growth in the US, in Canada, in other parts of the world, which they are more familiar with. And we will let these guys do something there because they can. And if they don't, nobody else will. So you may as well give it to them. I say it's a very simplistic way of thinking about it. We would present it as, look, these are the future. This is the future. This is the opportunity in the world. Whilst you're very busy with your core markets, don't ignore the future. What will happen in 20 years from now will be something very different and something we look at today with AI and everything else, completely inconceivable as to where we could have been. So it was always about looking towards the future, helping them understand that they should not ignore any part of the market, because if you do, somebody else will come in and take it from you. So let us do that for you.
Perfect. Okay, excellent. So that's where you're up today. And talk to me about when it comes to yourself, Sunny, right? What is your definition of success?
Very interesting. So it comes in many forms, I think. As a more mature person now, it would be very much about good family, good health, being able to make choices. Yeah, the choices that I wouldn't have been able to make as a 20-something-year-old, but almost having the freedom to do most things that you want to do. Okay, that's super important. I'm very much family oriented, very close to my children, to my wife, and that matters a lot. I love traveling. I love taking those experiences in. But these are things which I'm now able to do, having made different choices in the past to sacrifice other things earlier in your life. So if a success for me is now to have the freedom to do most things that I would like to be able to do in my life.
Okay, fantastic. And what was it when you started off? It was a different, you were much younger, 20 years, 23 years younger.
Making money.
Like it,
The most basic one. It's all about making money in the early days. And then as you get enough, you need to know that you have enough as well. Then those definitions of success change very substantially.
and
And that is the point, having enough of a certain thing that you wanted and not having to necessarily push again and again for something which potentially becomes toxic after a while. Yeah. But
Yes.
because you can never be happy with a certain amount. You need to know when enough is enough of a certain thing.
I get it. I totally agree. And I know in the pre-call we were talking about how you were telling me always record and take pictures of your, like my daughter, don't lose those memories. So has that been one of the main factors in actually shaping your life, where you're keeping
Yeah.
close to the family and not losing those memories out there?
Absolutely. It was that thing. I do feel that was one sort of major regret, not having spent as much time as I wish I should have with my children. And I'm so happy that my wife took so many videos and photographs, because you look back with so much fondness at what they were like and just didn't realize how quickly it goes. So now I spend as much time as possible with them. And I always force time on them that you have to go on holiday with us. You have to do all these things that you might say, I don't want to do that, but actually you will remember it fondly. And that is what we will have to hold on to when we're older, as much older. So those things matter a lot to me.
No, but I agree. So family on one side, Sunny, if we're talking to CEOs who are just stepping into that role right now, talk to me about your physical fitness and your mental fitness. What do you do around the physical fitness and mental fitness side of it too?
Yeah, I'm in my early 50s, so the fitness has become ever more important. And there's so much information out there now telling you what you should be doing. The things I was told when I was young, what constituted good health later on in age or even previously, is very different to the sort of more science-based approach you get today. Despite all the misinformation we get, obviously. But I'm an avid exerciser. I will exercise every single day without fail, whether it's a lot or a little, but I will set aside an hour. If that means I wake up very early, I will make sure I do that. And I don't compromise on that. So that's very important to me. And for me, I'm not when you talk about the whole thing about mental fitness, which I prefer to use, mental fitness is also very important, but I probably haven't embraced it because I'm not quite calm enough to engage in things like people talk about meditation. I'm not a meditator. I don't really understand it well enough. But I think if you have certain periods of solitude, I think that can serve a similar, like it provides you with a similar result to that. So that's important. But I do think you need to have the right foundation for the future, for your future health. And if you don't do it now, and when you're older, you will not be able to do it then. It will be too late. As I say, I talk about physical injuries. So if you're exercising, something hurts today, give yourself time to recover. Because if you don't fix it now, 10 years from now, that little niggle might become a real problem for you. So it's better to pay attention to every element of your being, especially as you get older. Yeah. And early enough so that it doesn't become irreparable.
Yeah. So on one side, you have an ambitious CEO trying to get up to being there so that no one knocks him down. And on the other side, there's this delicate balance of managing the work-life balance with the kids, not missing any moments. And then you have the physical fitness and all. If there's a 40-year-old Sonny sitting in front of you, would you tell him anything different the way you've done it today?
Yeah, I think so. I would say probably try to focus as much as you can on the specific thing you're doing. Okay.
An example?
No, because I'm very sort of anti-social media on a lot of things. Okay, so I say if you have time to do something with family around you or friends around you, and friends is super critically important as well, and then you should do that. Okay, you should spend that time. Don't have a phone available. And I've been guilty of the exact opposite, right? And I say it from a position of experience that I wish I had not done that, and I wish perhaps I hadn't built up even a reputation at that time. He's always got his phone with him, but it was the running joke for a very long time, and I think it will take me another 10 years to completely lose that. Because if you someone can pick it up now, they say, oh, it's him on his phone again. And they'll forget the fact that you do it 10% of what you used to do. So having that focus is actually really important. Being there in the moment, I think is the way my wife said it to me, that you should be there in the moment is very important with your family, with your friends, and all the experiences that you have. So I would give that advice and say, when you're at work, you're 100% at work. When you're with your family, you're 100% with them, with your friends, 100%. So that having that focus will probably mean you get a much better result in every element of your life for sure. And so if you're with your team and they know you're with them 100%, they will perform better as a result as well. There are things that you will want to impart to them, and they'll pay attention more if they know you're not being distracted elsewhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And going along that theme, like, what's your, we spoke about the success side of it. In terms of your failure, what's been your biggest failure and what did you actually learn from that experience?
Because it's very interesting. Okay. I am an eternal optimist, which probably means that I see things a little more rosily than sometimes I should.
Yes.
And that I can't change about myself. I do think everything can be resolved, everything can be improved. And that's something which probably took me a very long time to understand that actually it's not always possible. So you will look in business scenarios and say, we can do this and we can do that. But it also means you can achieve things that others can't. Yeah, because you're always trying to find a way to get around it. But I've not really thought about that. But say I always talk with regret about, or from a personal perspective, like not having been at home enough. Work-wise, we've done fairly well, so I'm quite happy with that. But it's just, I think you look back at various business decisions, would you have done the same? I suppose you did what you do, the best you do at the time, with what you have available at that time. Never say hindsight is always great,
Yes.
but you're never there, and you never know at the time. Generally, it's been a good ride. Yeah, I say the markets we work in, they never make it easy for you. So a lot of the planning that I would do today, we couldn't have done then. And even if you do them today, they're intrinsically flawed to a greater extent than if you were doing them for other industries and other countries.
Got it. Got it. And that's a good point out there. When I'm talking about what's been a major turning point in your life or your career through all these 23 years?
I think the way we ran our company changed over time. So it was initially you go there and every day is different and there's not really much opportunity for planning.
Okay.
You don't have the resources as a small or medium-sized business at the beginning. It's all about what can you get out of that day? What can you do to, and I say, what can you do to build relationships with people which will help you in the future? And that's all you have. You say, I keep on trying to keep my customer happy, keep my supplier happy, having all the right mixes there. And in those days, obviously, cash flow is even more important. And it wasn't even about let's sell at a certain gross profit or let's look at this or ratio of finances. None of those things mattered. It's just about how you make sure your business continues to steadily grow or maintain its progress. But then you reach a certain point where your techniques have to change completely. And you reach these different levels, these plateaus. And each time you reach that plateau, the process has to change or the style of management has to change. And that's always been a challenge. Okay. Been a challenge because you're dealing with many different personalities. You're and you're trying to tell people within the business who've done things a certain way for many years successfully that actually we're going to have to change again. Okay. Or the world has changed. Yeah. Either
Yep.
we're going to have to change, number one, because we're not the company we were 5 years ago, 3 years ago, but also the world is a different place. And I say, looking at where we are today, the same business environment and where we were 20 something years ago, that approach of that time would not work today because all of those markets have moved on. They're far more sophisticated and the availability of data and the internet and everything it brings with it means that your style of business has to change. Your style of management has to be different.
That's interesting. And how much of that, talk to me, who's in your inner circle right now? What are the roles? What kind of
No,
people are they?
so if I say, what are the key roles that I look at? If I just answer your question slightly differently,
Sure.
I think the way I've become as a CEO, because of the size of the company, I've always been too hands-on, and I've now learned to be very much hands-off. Okay, and to be much more of a reviewer, much more of explaining the direction. Why are we doing what we're doing, but doing less on a day-to-day basis from a direct, actually working on something. But that doesn't mean you don't work. That means you're constantly on it, but you're communicating a lot. You're explaining a lot as to what's going on. You're trying to explain to yourself sometimes why am I doing that? And you justify to yourself, whether it's in numbers yourself, or whether speaking to others that this is what we're going to be doing and this is why we're doing it. So the strategic thinking, the direction you're taking, the communication to all the people you work with becomes ever more important. And for that, then you must have a really good operations person, the person who believes in what you're saying, who has faith in what you do, and who should be able to debate and argue with you openly for a start. Yeah. Do not have people around you. You need someone who can aggressively fight back. But once they've done it, they've said their piece, you've understood it, and you've understood it from a perspective that you listen to why they're saying it. You didn't listen to be able to answer. You listen and you say, oh, yeah, I get your point of view. Maybe that'll change what I'm saying. Maybe it won't. But you've got to be absolutely open. But then once you make that decision, they've got to implement it 100%. Okay. So we all say our piece, we do what we're doing, but once we make a decision, everybody falls behind it. So you need to have a very good operations guy. You need to have a very good finance guy. And then you typically in anything like this, like in the food business, supply chain, managing distribution models, you need to have a technical person who has that experience to work with you. So 3 or 4 people like this are the keys to your success. And at any level, any scale, those are the general, I would say, roles that people need to have in order for you to be successful.
And if I take it one level deeper, one level study on the outside the business, who else is there within your inner circle to keep you grounded?
As in on a personal level, you mean?
Yes. Yes.
I suppose my wife does that very well. And your children remind you and wonder why does anybody pay you to do anything? So it's always interesting. So yes, I would say family, my parents would always remind you to be a certain way, and these things make a big difference. And your friends, you have friends. I'm fortunate enough to have friends who have been my friends since I was like 10 years old.
Wow.
So that's a real privilege, okay? Because those people will tell you anything and everything and tell you when you're an absolute idiot, and they have no sense of how will he take it. He'll just have to take it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
I have many good, and I say I'm very fortunate to have a few good friends from the time I was that young, from university, a good circle still from my university days, where I said people just know you as you are, and there are no airs and graces, and it's nice to have that honesty around you.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah. It's a privilege. It's a blessing to have.
Yes, it is a privilege, yeah, because if you are lucky enough to be successful in the way people see it, then you pick up yes men along the way, and that's nice.
Yeah. And Dr. May, you've mentioned the world changed, the company grew. You as an individual, Sunny, what did you go for any additional training or mentoring, or how did you develop as a person, and how did your leadership team develop as a team?
All right, okay. So we sold the majority stake in our company 3 and a bit years ago. That led to a change in the style of management. But if you talk about a specific training that I took, I would say, I mean, I did an MBA many years ago. That was fine. Probably I should have done it later because you have more relevant business experience to really take in what it is. But you can still draw upon some of the learnings of that time. I did a couple of short courses, and very honestly, my father-in-law was a very good mentor to me as well. A very grounded person who, taught taught you everything from the bottom up, and how important it was to understand everything and work very hard, and more than possibly I might have done otherwise. So that was very important for me. But in terms of formal training, no, I haven't, but I've had plenty of on-the-job experience over the years. And actually, I've been very lucky that I've also been able to mix with people who are high achievers, very intelligent. I have a number of friends. I'm fortunate enough to have a number of friends that are like that. And you sit there and you have a great conversation, but you always know you've learned something while you've been in their company as well. So that's been very helpful.
Brilliant. And Sunny, has there been a moment in your career, your life where you said, I can't do this? And how did you actually overcome? Has there any been, I know you're a person with the glass is always half full rather than
Yeah,
half empty.
absolutely. So you have those moments, if I can say, for want of a better word, so moments of panic or moments of absolute despair, and say, how the hell do we manage this, or how do we
Yeah.
deal with this? And I say one of my qualities is that I am quite patient as a person, and sometimes I can actually walk away from a situation for a short while, then try to think calmly, detach yourself, and then come back to it. And I think that has always meant that we can manage most things. But there are situations around the world that happen to us. The countries we work in mean that too much happens around the world where you have zero control over it. Yeah, zero control. There's nothing you can do. And the success in those cases generally being that you actually deconcentrate from any one region. No matter how successful it become, you actively focus on doing other things that drive your income. And it's not easy, right?
It's based on emotional or data driven when you make those decisions? Was it based on emotion or data driven when you have to say walk out from X or Y?
No, it was, again, see, the problem is data has become ever more important in the last, I would say maybe last 10 years. And the quality of that data is also critically important. So the quality of data today is, even in the last couple of years, has changed immeasurably, right, from where you were a decade ago. And we've never had the availability of such good data for many countries. And there's a certain level of opacity where you just don't know quite what's going on until you have people there. And even then, it's hard to pull that data together. So some of it is gut, some of it is taking a small sample of what you're seeing as your activity and saying, that is, I think, a small sample of what is going on everywhere, and then trying to replicate that and saying, if that carries on happening the way it is, that's what it will lead to. And is that good or bad? Is it a risk, or are we too reliant on one particular piece of the business? And that's been something we've been trying to always move forward, do more things different, and more different ways of bringing funds in, bringing revenue and profits in. That's something most business would say. Try not to be reliant on one thing. And actually, when you look at some of the most successful companies, you'll probably find that they're really reliant on just a handful of things overall, and not on what is actually probably a very long tail of other activities and products being sold.
Absolutely. And let's go on to on the similar thing. How do you approach risk in your business? Do you play big or play safe or swing big?
Because of the places we work in, we generally play safe. But the risk comes in just being in those countries in the first place, trying to understand how those markets work, how they work, but trying to understand the culture, trying to understand compliance matters, funds flow, all these things, and consumption patterns. I say, I'm a consumer goods, so
Yes.
how does a consumer buy something? and trying to understand how they do things differently. The way we consume a product here is not the same way they'll do it in Sierra Leone. I give people the example that when we used to sell Marmite in a big way, we were one of the, or Unilever, we were distributors for them. We would just use it as a spread here. But in Sierra Leone, it's sold in a very small, you get different sizes. You got 250 gram, 125. You get a very small one. And it would be sold behind the counter as a delicacy there. And for us, it's just mama, right? But then something really special. And I say, okay, income levels and such really make a difference. But actually, some of these products become very expensive by the time they're there. And they're consumed as different. So understanding the cultural differences in these places is very rewarding in terms of personally, but also from a business perspective, it can make a huge difference.
And from your side, being the CEO for over a decade, did you actually travel into those particular countries and experience firsthand what the consumers actually are going through? Or is that something you had teams?
Probably not enough. I would tend to go to key business centers and ask people to come and visit. So I should qualify why that is. We would do business in about 120 countries. Okay. And they would be far flung. So you could say, yeah, I do business in most of Europe, but then you would also say, I do business in countries like Fiji. Okay. Now, to go to Fiji to visit a customer might be really challenging from a time perspective. And if you look at that spread, it is it is every continent of the world where we would be doing business, and to cover those countries would be impossible. So I would go to Singapore, I would go to Dubai, go to the US, and I would generally go to all the exhibitions and say, let's all meet there. And places like Dubai, very easy immigration for business. You'd have 20, 30 people coming to see you over the course of a few days. And then you can actually get to meet everybody. But it always helps to be able to see them. See what they're doing. And I've been to too few, to be honest, but enough of the important ones to know that those trips or having that knowledge made a material difference to our business.
Understood. When it comes to running, what's the biggest misconception people have about running a successful business in the FMCG space?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. Okay, so look, people often think that the CEO has a very easy day. Okay, but unfortunately, all too often you are a slave to the business, and your time is never your own. Okay.
Yes.
And the way to manage that is to be super well organized, to delegate it very well, and to have exceptionally good people around you. I'm sorry, I've forgotten what the question was.
No, the question was, what's the biggest misconception people have about running?
People think it's a charmed lifestyle. Okay, and it definitely is not that. You are. Look, the buck stops with you. You are responsible for everything that happens in that business at the end of the day. People generally won't give you the credit for good things, but they will certainly come after you for the bad, and they very quickly forget the good things as well.
Yeah.
And you've just got to be honest with it and just get on with it, and say, I'm fortunate enough from a professional, personal perspective to be here. Enjoy it, do the very best that you can. But anybody looking in should know that it's a very tough role. That sense of responsibility is quite a burden.
Yes. And also long hours, given the geography, you're operating 120 odd.
Absolutely. Waking up at 5 a.m. is no problem for me, and it's very common. And I will generally just wake up at 5 a.m. because it's just become a habit. And then,
Even on a weekend.
yes, you wake up and then you have to get to sleep again. You have to make yourself go back to sleep after a little while. And it's quite hard. It's not the best habit. It's not, unfortunately, one of the bad habits, but it's difficult sometimes.
I get it. Yes. Totally. And what do you wish more CEOs, actually business leaders, knew about scaling a business? You've been through this whole thing.
Yeah, I would say the delegation is super important, and gradually build your team with all the right skills. And sometimes you don't get the right person at the first attempt, but gradually building that team and having the right people, and then actually giving them the work to do on their own, letting them be the same person you are, right? There's no reason why they are any less than you. So you've got to learn to not do it yourself, give it to them, and make them accountable, make them responsible, and make them enjoy their successes as well, fully. Yeah, share that reward, share the success.
Is it tough delegating? Or was it tough delegating in the beginning? Or because
Absolutely, yeah, it was. And it always is so in a family environment, because ultimately it comes down to you. And the family will look at you and say, why did you do that? Yeah, why didn't you do it yourself, or why didn't you give it to another family member? So that's not always ideal. But nonetheless, you modernize over time, and the results of it speak for themselves. But yes, it is, because when you've done it yourself, it's hard to see somebody else start doing it and start doing it badly at the beginning quite often as well. Yeah.
Yeah, this is interesting. From a leadership role, how do you actually embrace failure within the organization or within the leadership?
I take it. I'm not stressed about it. And to be honest, again, the challenges of the markets we work in mean that there are little failures always along the way. And I'm very much a believer in it together. You've got to succeed and fail together, and your team becomes a hell of a lot stronger if they know that you've got their back, or you'll cover them, or you'll do everything you can to help them succeed. And they'll do the same for you. Yeah, and that just means that you pull together, knowing that actually we'll all help each other when that time is needed.
Excellent. And let's look back at when COVID was a kind of game changer for a lot of businesses. How did actually COVID maybe help you all remodel your business? Was there any kind of change in that when COVID hit?
Yeah, for us, it was a very tough time because, see, we're exporters. So if you are dealing with a Nestle, for instance, and we work on their baby milk formula range, we used to export a lot of that, or we still do, I should say. We export a lot of that, and we would, when COVID came, the first thing was they reduced the supply because shifts were shorter. Yeah, there was less production of the product. Then the priority was the UK. So they would say, we're going to make, say, 1,000 tons or something. And they would say, in the past, we would have 300 tons for the UK, 700 could go for whatever. And now all of a sudden that production has gone down and they're saying we're only going to make 400 or 500 tons. And then we still need 300 for the UK. But because it's COVID, I need to keep a 100-ton buffer. Okay. So all of a sudden your availability of product is just gone. So it's very hard to keep the same levels of business going in product at that time, which meant that other producers that didn't have that success could suddenly start getting into market. So that was a challenge. The second thing was, I say, we look at the countries we worked in. They didn't have, as chaotic as it was for us, the same sort of organized way that everybody stayed at home and did things a certain way. And that made it challenging. And so getting product was out. Doing business with other countries, which shut down completely, but in a very haphazard way, was very difficult. But the demand for product never went down in that time. But you can imagine, I'll just give you an example. One of my customers in Nigeria would say to me, I want to buy more from you. I've got the money to send you, but I can't get to the bank because they only open for 1 hour a day. Okay, and you have to queue up for everything. It's not online banking.
Yes.
So everyone's desperate to do business, but they couldn't do it. So this was a challenge. And I say, unfortunately, the place we were, you couldn't just do Zoom calls with everybody. They don't have the bandwidth that in those countries, the broadband bandwidth, to be able to have effective communication. So you were trying to do as much as you could in a very challenging environment. I said, and also it wasn't just a shortage of availability. It was also surplus at times. They would just say, listen, I'm going to make this much at this time, and either you buy it now or you don't buy it at all. Yeah, I can't promise you'll have it in a week from time. So you're dealing with all this supply chain, the varying stock levels, obviously people not coming into the office, trying to tell everybody trying to make everybody work in a way that still meant the business carry on running well. It was very challenging. We did manage it. We did carry on functioning effectively in that time. And we had a team that worked very hard, and we rotated in the office, and most people didn't come in. But I say people actually genuinely pulled together at that time, and we just kept going. It was okay.
Brilliant. And did that lead to a surge in your own or homegrown kind of branding? Was that because given Nestle and all the kind of technology and demand, did that help you in a different way?
Unfortunately, it wasn't. It didn't help because you couldn't get enough of anything. So your biggest problem was if you were buying, if you could buy 10 of something before, you can only buy 7 or 8 of it afterwards. So you lost that business during that period, and it was like bad luck, right? Not much you can do here. And when you talk about, were you able to get your own products out there, your own range of products out there, to varying degrees of success, but that shortage of product was certainly a problem the entire time. And then when it came back, didn't come back very well because the first thing we had, the COVID more or less declined heavily in late 2021, which is also when we sold our majority shareholding. But 2022 meant the Ukraine-Russian conflict, massive inflation, shipping prices were still through the roof. So the next couple of years were absolutely turbulent. Yeah, no surety. All the planning you had made in the run up to those 2 years just were a bit of a nightmare to try to navigate through. But let's say we're still around and still doing we did get through it. But I felt for a lot of businesses, a lot of people at that time, how tough it was. And being at home a little bit more, probably being on the phone a lot, not meeting people so much, it was interesting to hear the stories of people who were being challenged. But obviously people I know in the tech sector, they were fantastic. They thrived beyond belief at that time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And the change in the workplace culture, that was a real challenge because everybody talks right afterwards that, firstly, the ability to impress upon your team that we need to go back to what we were doing had disappeared. Okay. It was all about we're going to work the way we want to work. Or it was all about how can we work remotely? How much work from home can you have? And it was a real pressure. Yeah, it was a real pressure at that time. But I'm a guy who will go to the office, believes in being in there. Doesn't mean everybody has to do it, because I just happen to be productive that way. But it almost became a right of everybody that I will work the way I want to work. Yeah, irrespective of anything. And that was challenging. You have to be pragmatic. You have to, so those were the times and you have to live with it. But you look at where we are today, and companies just saying work from home is no longer an option, or it's back to where it was pre-2020. Yeah, at that level where it is a day, not 3 days. Yeah, in the week.
Okay, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And you mentioned we spoke about COVID, and you had the energy crisis with the Ukraine-Russia war. Today we are now in tariff war. How is that? How is global tariffs now actually impacting your business, if any?
Simac, I'm taking a quite relaxed view on them. They are there, but I think they're there until they drop sharply in the end anyway. So my view on this is that this is a revenue raising activity, not something which is meant to completely change the state of global trade. But unfortunately, I think it might cause substantial shifts in the way people see some of the markets now. But I think it will be just about redefining some of the relationships the Americans have with some of their major trading partners. But trade is symbiotic, right? At the end of the day, you need each other. Okay. Things that other countries do well necessarily are because they can do something you can't. But if you artificially make it worse, which is what I think is being addressed now, then fair enough. You have to rebalance that. But to suddenly say America should make all of its own t-shirts is not an answer. But should some of those countries still charge the Americans for what they export? No, that's not right. Okay. So I think there's just going to be a little bit of a rebalancing. I think the trade will be more normal as to what we know. And it had to shock the world into doing this, which I think is what you're seeing everywhere. It's almost like shock therapy everywhere you go. And after that, everything calms down. Shortly afterwards. So you just have to, again, it's more about volatility today and troughs and peaks and how do you deal with those. But I think in reality, again, and it may be my over-optimistic view on things, but I think generally things come back to a certain level. It's just the journey getting there is going to be a little bit choppy at the moment.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And maybe it's a realization also, right? To get the industries back to US, I think it takes 6-7 years, and then to find the skill to people to do it at that level again, whether they exist or not, that's another crazy amount of time.
What's the job? Do they even want to do that? Yeah,
exactly.
Where will you find people that want low-paid jobs, which would otherwise be more than sufficient in another country and its cost levels for existence? I'm not sure. I'm not sure the strategy is there, but I think that the message is that let's rebalance our trade tariffs a little bit, and we're going to do it through a lot of shock therapy for the world.
Yes, agreed. And looking at the trends, a shift, what's one trend or shift in your industry that excites you or maybe concerns you?
I think everything is becoming far more automated, far more sophisticated. The importance of data is very helpful. And I think that will lead to a lot less waste and a lot more efficiency in the world. So supply chain has become critically important over the world. You look at Amazon. Amazon is not a retailer. Amazon is a supply chain company to me, the way I see it. You want something, they'll give it to you when you want it. And their ability to deliver to you when you want it is a key factor. So in our food and drink business, that ability to understand your customer and what their consumption patterns are is going to be, I think, super important. And people who embrace that will actually find that they will capture those customers, and putting those people on a platform, on an online platform, will be the next sort of success point for our company.
It's interesting. And where the AI is buzzword, machine learning, whatever you want to call it, where do you all see that within the company? And also, how do you actually stay ahead of these market disruptions or maybe evolving customer needs at that level when it comes to technology like AI?
Look, if I say to you, you look at your own behavior today, do you shop online more? Do you shop for food online more? Okay, so if you do, then you know your behavior has changed. And then you've got to understand then, in our business, in the distribution business, in the wholesale business, you would go to those customers and say, look, why don't you, every time you realize your warehouse is running short of a product, put it on an app. Yeah, put it on our app if we have an app, and put it on there so you don't forget. Okay, and then I will make sure you got it. And then somebody will call you before your order is completed and just say, you got this. But last time you bought something else. Do you still need that? Did you miss it out? And they can do 70-80% of the work for you. And that 20% that's left over, which needs to be done, can be done by person. And that's where your relationship will count. But you've enabled it and made life easier for somebody to do their business. And that is your relationship. And you just happen to have used an online platform or the power of AI to do that. And AI will then just take that data as the data grows and say, you don't even have to order anymore. I'll tell you what you're going to have.
Yes.
Okay. And which is what I say your supermarket chains can do for you as an individual. They can tell you what you ate at a certain time and remind you that last year in June you had this. Did you have a barbecue, or was it just because you felt like having chicken or whatever? But so I think, and that's it, you're seeing it, right? Seeing all this happen. You're being preempted for everything you buy. Suggestions are being given to you. People are saying people who buy this will also buy this. And you're being prompted for everything as you go forward. So the role of AI, I think, will become ever more important. And it will still for a while be a support structure for people rather than something which actually leads for others. Okay. But for me, I'm 100% sold for it. I think it's critically important. I think if you don't embrace it, you will be left behind in no time at all, and faster than you ever have at this point.
How do you see the industry actually evolving in the next 5 to 10 years based on that?
I think every company needs to become an IT company, which happens to do other
Right.
so anything.
Interesting.
But so if you're a transport company, you need to have an online platform today, and you just happen to be a technology company that runs trucks, as an example. And I think that's going to be the general direction or the general definition of every company, that how do you harness technology for the activity that you currently do today? And once you've got that technology, what else can you do with it? Yeah, you're no longer limited to just the core activity you're doing, because that should open up other ways of doing business or other things that maybe didn't exist for a certain time. So I think the technology is going to become the defining part of every business and the quality of that going forward. And
Game changer.
absolutely, I think in every single thing. But then I suppose that comes to the question, what will we all do? Yeah. And if that is the case, then I think we as managers or as people will need to make sure that we retain relationships and build relationships. And I think that will be the future. So your online systems will do the bulk of the operation, which can be done by machines. And then after that, it will be the people maintaining the relationships with people. Because I don't know how you find it, but I find chatbots hugely frustrating and unhelpful. And we've gone from a world where you could phone somebody and pick up, and you would have somebody else picking up the phone at the end of the end and resolving your problem, to that now being a luxury or a privilege. Yeah, to have that. Well, otherwise, there's all just chatbots and calls and stuff, or WhatsApp messages.
Yeah, Sunny, then it'll be very tough for you to give up your mobile phone in that case.
Who knows what we'll be using next? And so we didn't understand these phones 17, 18. The smartphones, the iPhone came out in 2008. What did we all do before then?
Yeah.
Let's see which direction the technology takes us next.
Yeah. I'm not going to go back where we would stand next to the phone when we had the landline and you couldn't walk as well as you can. Or the reception of the cordless was not that great. Let's move back to Teams, your management side of it. I know you have a family-run business, but what's your approach to building high-performing teams? You need high-performing teams for your company running 120 locations. So what's been your approach to building high-performing teams out there?
It's always been, I mentioned to you earlier that it's always been about building a team that knows that you're there for them. And I think that makes a hell of a difference to people. But this is not just we're colleagues at work, but because we're colleagues at work, because your income, because your mental fitness, because so much of your life is dependent on what you do at work every day, you need to have that support structure at work. And I say this is not an HR department. It's in your immediate circle around you, everybody you work with.
Yeah.
Those people need to be able to be very close to each other in order to be a well-functioning team. And that needs to be something which is replicated throughout the company. So it could be just groups of 4 or 5 people or bigger, depending on what that company structure is. But to have that small group around you, I think is really important. And which is why if you work in an environment where you don't have that, or where you're thinking that I don't like the people I'm with, probably better not to be there, because it means that you will never progress, or you want to move as quickly as you can from that. Sometimes you can't, right? So that's also I'm talking from the situation where somebody has the option to work, but to have the option to move if need be, but to have each other's back, to know you're there for each other. But if something's wrong with you or you don't do well, somebody else will help pick up the piece of it and fix things, and you will do exactly the same for them. That I think is really important. Okay, and I think it's really underplayed, unfortunately, but that makes all the difference.
And speaking of leadership, I know you've been invited to, I believe, a couple of universities in the UK or in London. Talk to me about that part of it.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoy talking to students, and you share your experiences, you share whatever you've seen in life, and I think that's really helpful for them to see it firsthand. It's a little bit different to seeing it on a YouTube chat or something, but to be in person and then to ask those questions they might not otherwise be able to do, sometimes in front of everybody, sometimes privately at the end. So I've always enjoyed that, and I've generally done it on international trade, on cultural, family, business culture. They're the 2 biggest ones, but even just generally speaking to them makes a difference. You help people understand that the world is not idealized as it is in a book, or even the world is not a nice place. Most we leave universities or any education place thinking everyone's okay out there. It's not going to be bad. People are generally nice to each other. And that's not the case, right? So you find there are people hungry, desperate for success who will do anything to get there. And you've got to be wary of those, and you've got to just conduct yourself in a different way to get success. And I find that very interesting and very personally rewarding as well. So I'm doing it from time to time. I thoroughly enjoy it, but I think that's very helpful because people just don't get that opportunity either. Yeah, they don't get that opportunity to speak to people who've been there and done it a little bit, and so to have that one-to-one interaction sometimes.
And what's the misconception that I would say, or what is it that the generation coming out of university, the students coming out of university need to be aware of? You've spoken to them. So what are some of the misconceptions they have at times?
Yeah, so it's different things. So an interesting one was that, for instance, they put it a different way. I quite often speak at King's in London, and I think a couple of other universities. But recently I was invited to Imperial College to sit with some students, and they were talking, and they had like a mini UN type panel. And they were talking about what are the things that they would want to eliminate from the UN's Charter of Challenges the world faces today. And some of those things they were talking about, I'd want to get rid of world hunger, I'd want to get rid of poverty. And you're looking at all those, and they would say, how would you do it? And there was no, how do you do it? Nobody had that answer. And I'm sitting there as a person with a bit of business experience. And I said, well, the first thing is you need economic growth. That's the first thing you have to do. So if you do that and you have good governance as a second one, as a country, and the third one is you do make sure you do what you can for the climate. Because for the climate, yeah, so that we don't lose any control or any influence we have on the climate still. It was about explaining to them that help everybody have an industry, have fruitful labor, which will help them generate an income and make everybody better off. And you see that today, countries like China that have unbelievable growth in that country, where they have taken so many people out of poverty, and you can replicate that everywhere in the world. And trying to explain to people that how many people die of hunger every year, it's about 8 million people. Compare how many people died in COVID, and it's nothing like that number, but this is every year. So you could take most of those people out of poverty if we have good governance and economic conditions which help develop those countries. And actually you get rid of a lot of the problems in the world. And then that helps you with the climate, because today if somebody's alive and they can't imagine what their tomorrow is going to be like, they don't care if you chop a tree down or over farm something, because they can't plan that far ahead. So you need to give them a future. You need to give them an idea that there is something you have to do apart from survive today, so that your children will be able to survive, or the next generation will be there as well. But unless you give them that vision of survival, of being able to thrive, being able to get somewhere, there'll be no improvement in those places.
Got it. And as an organization, do you actually invite, I would say, interns into the company to just experience the normal day-to-day?
Yeah, we have been asked. So we have previously, and it's an occasional thing that we do for sure. In all fairness, my father-in-law is a very sort of seasoned individual, so he also goes and talks to people directly, and we find that tends to be very fruitful as well. We do try to share our experience with people in one form or another. So young people in one form or another for sure.
Okay. So when you go, this all talks and looks to me on the personal branding side of it. How important has your personal brand been in growing your business at all?
Never, never, to be honest. It's obviously, you talk about these superstar CEOs and they tend to be in very big companies, but it's not something which I've looked at. You just get on, you start off wanting to be just making enough money for your family to have a good lifestyle, and then it grows from there. And then you suddenly realize, I don't need to be on social media. And I mentioned to you at the beginning, I'm not a huge fan of social media. I think it's out of control, and we seem to be one of the very few countries that has no controls on it at all. And I look at India banned TikTok. China has curbs on it. Is China curbing its social media, trying to control people? Or is it just trying to say, actually, this is not the best thing for you and we should block it a little bit? And so I'm not a fan of a lot of things I see on social media and the branding that comes with it. But a little bit of it, just that you sell it from a marketing perspective, that to propagate your business a little bit more, then do you need to be out there a little bit more? Then yes, that makes sense, but not necessarily in headlights all the time.
Got it. And just lastly, to wrap up this, talk to me about what's your kind of morning routine? Do you have a structured morning routine? I know you get up at 5 a.m., but is there something, or you just bang work getting?
I don't know, 5 a.m., just plan your day a little bit more, just reflect on what needs to be done for the day, what's important, what's not. And I try to be, I've become more constructive with my time, more focused on what to do at certain times. And I've set myself various targets. Like I've never played golf, but I've set myself a target to start playing golf at the end of this month for the first time in my life.
End of
I'm
this
all-
month. Wow.
Start.
Yeah, start to hear.
So I've never done that. So various things that I thought I should do, I've just made a point, right? Okay, I'm going to do it now. And I've started doing a couple of things and I'm thoroughly enjoying doing those. And I set aside time every day to do that. So it may just be half an hour in a day, but I'll say that time slot is just for this and nobody can take it from me now. And if that means I wake up very early in the morning, I'll spend an hour doing a couple of things. And I mentioned to you, if I know I'm going to have a busy day, I'll wake up early to make sure I get some time on a treadmill, get my exercise out of the way and then start my day after that. But I will not miss out on a few things. So my day is reasonably structured and I have diary that says, okay, on certain times every day, on certain days of the week, we will do certain things with team members around the world and make sure those are followed. And then that helps build a healthy routine for them as well. That this is something the business expects, is something we should do a certain way. And everybody has more structure as a result of that. So it's good. But then the other times when you're off your diary, do what you like. And just relax in bed and do what the hell you want. Yeah.
So when do you know when to stop?
In what respect? Sorry, I didn't understand. In terms of generally?
Generally, yes.
From a work perspective, you just decide, okay, these are things I need to do today. It's enough for now. I can't say that your work stops being on your mind. You stop at 6, 7 o'clock in the evening and that's it. You're not thinking about it. No, you think about it, but you think about different things and you think about development. You will think about more development things. You'll think about softer elements of the business and the direction it will take, which you can't necessarily do when you're engaged with people. And so that time for sort of quiet reflection can happen. So from a daily perspective, that's what you would do. But from when is enough for other things, you just see that I've got enough of certain things that I want and I won't do that anymore now. And that's just a personal decision.
Yeah. And what is what's one question you wish people asked you and they've not asked you till now?
People ask me a question.
Yeah.
That's I wish very difficult thing. I'm just trying to think that you're asking me that question. I'm saying, what would looking back on things, do you wish things had happened differently? And that could be something, or what would people typically ask questions like, what would you tell your younger self, for instance? That's quite a common question I get asked. And it would just be much more focused in everything you do. Yeah. And think long term. Don't be an immature 20-something-year-old. Think long term, because the foundations you lay down early in life are going to be a lot stronger if you actually put them down earlier in life and mature about them and you understand that. At that age, it's probably less about living in the moment and more about planning for your future, because there's a lot of living still to do at that age. And I tell you, this is what I'm trying to do with our children now, that teach them more about financial independence, about knowing how to have a bank account for something as simple as that. Our children can cook themselves. They were taught all these things, that you should be independent completely of your parents. If you need, but all of these sort of sensible things that probably we don't do enough of these days, and we need to do more, and just actually giving them a good grounding. Yeah, don't live on social media. Don't believe the life outside. The real world is actually not like that. Yeah, about being well grounded from a young age is important for me.
Oh, fantastic. And lastly, what's the book you're currently listening to, or what's the podcast you're listening to, reading to right now?
I have just finished a book and I'm looking around trying to see what's the next one that I'm reading. I've finished one which was something about being fooled by randomness, which was about the role of chance and coincidence in success in financial markets, which was an interesting one. But my problem is, I see an interesting book and I just buy it. Yeah, and I will pile up, and I've got a pile like 20 books that I want to read at the moment, and I will typically get through about one a month. And my way of reading is I will do 2 nonfiction, 1 fiction. And now you put me on the spot, and I can't remember the one I've got planned going forward, because I just finished the book yesterday. But I can tell you my last one. I think it was called Fooled by Randomness, something along those lines, which was a very interesting one. But I don't read enough as well. And I would suggest to people you should read more.
Got it. In one word, how would your family describe you, or your friends, your close friends from 10 years, who you've been since 10 years old?
You should be asking them that question. I think my family would probably say that I'm quite caring and I am patient with them. But then that can lead to overbearing for a teenager, I'm sure. So it's difficult to say if it's the right balance, but I'm very much focused on them. And I value the relationships I have a lot. My close friends and family in the world.
Yeah, 23 years, you're CEO of the group right now. Would you wish for more time or more money?
More time.
More time. All right. Sunny, thank you very much. This is great
Pleasure.
having you today.
Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye.